Right now, the oil market is a crime scene. As of January 2026, West Texas Intermediate, WTI, has cratered to $50 a barrel, leaving the world's biggest producers, from the shale fields of Texas to the desert sands of Riyadh, screaming for mercy. To the average driver, this looks like a win. But to the experts in the Situation Room, this is the most dangerous setup in energy history. While the headlines are obsessed with the supply glut and the 3.8 million barrel per day surplus predicted for 2026, a silent, more violent storm is gathering. We are looking at a market that is being hollowed out by underinvestment and geopolitical black swans. The same market that is trading at $52 today is just one major spark away from a supersonic vertical climb to 150. Today, we're diving into the Venezuela shock, the death of spare capacity, and why the current crash is actually the fuse for the biggest price explosion we've ever seen. To understand why the next shock will be so violent, you first have to understand why the price is bleeding out right now. In 2026, the oil market hit a wall of supply that no one expected to be this thick. We're talking about a multi-layered crash driven by three specific factors that have pushed WTI into the 52 to 53 support zone, with analysts at the EIA and Goldman Sachs warning of a dip into the 40s. First, there's the Venezuela flood. On January 3, 2026, the global geopolitical landscape shifted overnight with the capture of Nicolas Maduro. The Trump administration immediately signaled a Marshall Plan for Caracas, aimed at unlocking the country's 303 billion barrels of proven reserves. The news that the U.S. would facilitate the immediate return of Venezuelan crude to global markets acted like a bucket of ice water on prices. Traders who had spent years pricing in Venezuelan scarcity hit the sell button in unison. The psychological impact alone stripped $10 off the barrel in a single week. Second, we have the shale resiliency trap. Despite everyone saying U.S. shale was tapped out, production hit record highs of 13.6 million barrels per day in 2025. American drillers got too good at their jobs. Using AI-driven drilling and superlaterals that stretch for miles, they managed to keep the taps wide open. But here's the problem. At $52, the shale party isn't just ending, it's crashing. The Dallas Fed's 2026 survey shows that while existing wells can survive at $30, the cost to drill new wells has jumped to $61 to $70 per barrel. At $50, new drilling is a guaranteed loss. We are seeing the first production drop in 4 years as frackers go into hibernation mode. This isn't just a slowdown, it's a total decapitation of future supply. Finally, the demand mirage. China, once the world's insatiable oil engine, has pivoted to EVs and high-speed rail faster than anyone predicted. Their oil demand growth has slowed to a crawl. Combined with a cooling global economy and a projected surplus of 2.8 million barrels per day for 2026, the market is drowning in oil it can't use right now. This has created a feedback loop. Lower prices lead to less investment, which leads to a supply cliff just a few years down the road. Every day oil stays at $50, the future price target of $150 becomes more of a mathematical certainty. Now, let's talk about the trap. While the world is focused on the $50 price tag, the global spare capacity, the world's emergency brake, is evaporating. Spare capacity is the extra oil that Saudi Arabia and the UAE can bring to market in 30 days if a war breaks out. For decades, that buffer was comfortable. But in 2026, we've entered the danger zone. Years of green energy pressure and ESG mandates have forced the big oil majors, Exxon, Chevron, Shell, to starve their traditional oil projects of cash. This is what we call underinvestment. You can't just flip a switch and get more oil. You need 5 to 10 years of lead time. Because the world has been focused on the energy transition, the long-cycle spice projects The massive offshore platforms in the Gulf of Mexico and the deepwater wells in Brazil have been neglected. According to J.P. Morgan, we are entering the next wave of an energy supercycle. As production naturally declines in older fields in Russia, Mexico, and the North Sea, there isn't enough new oil coming online to replace it. Saudi Arabia is currently doing the heavy lifting, holding back millions of barrels to support the price, but their ability to act as the global central bank of oil is reaching its limit. If they open the taps to fill a gap, they might find that their spare capacity is more of a spare hope. Here is the nightmare scenario. If a major disruption happens today, there is almost no spare capacity left to fill the gap. Most of the world ES producers are already pumping at 100% capacity just to pay their bills at 50 ton. In January 2026, OPEC Plus actually agreed to extend production pauses through March, just to prevent a total price meltdown. This means that if the market suddenly needs an extra 2 million barrels, it won't find them. This fragility is what turns a $10 price spike into a $100 price explosion. We are living in a market that looks oversupplied on paper, but in reality, it's a just-in-time system with no backup plan. When the world finally realizes it's been living on borrowed time, the price won't just rise, it will teleport. So how do we get from a $50 crash to a $150 supersonic spike? It's not just a theory, it's a probability based on 4 potential fuses that are currently burning in early 2026. First, the Strait of Hormuz. This is the jugular of the world economy. 20% of the world's oil, roughly 20 million barrels per day, flows through this narrow gap. In early 2026, tensions with Iran are at a 10-year high. While the U.S. has signaled a desire to avoid a military option, the risk of a miscalculation is massive. If the strait is blocked for even a week, you aren't just losing a few barrels. You are losing the heartbeat of global industry. In that scenario, $150 oil happens in 48 hours. Second, the Russian infrastructure collapse. Ukraine has shifted its strategy from the front lines to energy warfare, using long-range drones to strike Russian refineries and export terminals like the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, CPC. Russia is already struggling with aging equipment and a lack of Western parts. If their export capacity is permanently damaged, the world loses one of its top 3 producers. A sanctioned Russia with its broken infrastructure creates a supply vacuum that Saudi Arabia cannot fill alone. Third, the Venezuela shock reversal. While the capture of Maduro looked like a supply win, the reality is a mess. Venezuela's oil infrastructure is a graveyard of rusted pipes and looted facilities. It will take $100 billion in a decade to get them back to 3 million barrels per day. If the transition leads to a protracted civil war or resource insurgency, those barrels the U.S. is counting on won't exist. The market will have to reprice the loss of that expected supply, sending WTI back into the stratosphere as traders realize the Venezuela flood was actually just a mirage. Fourth, the AI power surge. AI is devouring electricity at an exponential rate. The IEA projects that data centers could use 80% more energy in 2026 than in 2022. While we want that power to be green, the reality is that when the grid is strained, utilities turn to oil and gas. We are seeing a hidden demand shock, where oil is being used as the ultimate backup for the AI revolution. This AI oil loop is the black swan no one is pricing in. When the world needs power now, they burn oil. And in 2026, the world needs more power than ever before. Here is the friendly slang reality. Cheap oil is a trap. When oil sits at $52, it feels good at the pump. You're looking at $2.90 gasoline and thinking everything is fine. But beneath the surface, $52 oil is poisoning the well. At these prices, nobody wants to invest in the future. The risk takers in the Permian Basin go home. The deep water explorers in Brazil cancel their projects. This creates what geologists call a supply cliff. We are currently consuming the investments made 10 years ago. By late 2026 or 2027, the lack of new wells being drilled today will result in a massive permanent deficit. This is the boom-bust cycle on steroids. The 52 crash is effectively guaranteeing the $150 spike because it's destroying the very production we all need when the economy recovers. Moreover, the petrodollar is at a crossroads. Saudi Arabia requires $80 to $90 oil to balance its Vision 2030 budget. At $52, the kingdom is hemorrhaging cash. If they can't get a fair price for their oil in USD, they will start looking for a gold-backed or yuan-backed alternative to survive. A $50 oil price is an insult to their long-term strategy. To prevent an economic collapse at home, they will eventually do whatever it takes, including a nuclear production cut, to force the price back up. The U.S. is playing a high-stakes game. The administration wants cheap oil to kill inflation and win over voters, but they need expensive oil to keep the domestic shale industry alive. In 2026, the balance has tipped too far toward the crash. The elasticity of the market is gone. We are now in a binary market. It is either a supply glut or a total catastrophe. There is no middle ground. When the next shock hits, and with Hormuz and Russia on edge it will hit, the move from $50 to $150 won't be a gradual climb. It will be a super G takeoff that leaves the global economy in the dust. So enjoy the $2.90 gasoline while it lasts, because the red metal isn't the only thing going supersonic. The oil market is currently a coiled spring compressed by low prices and underinvestment, and it's about to snap. What do you think? Is $52 the new normal, or are we just waiting for the match that lights the $150 fire? Do you think the U.S. can actually fix Venezuela in time to save the market, or is that just a pipe dream? Let me know in the comments. I am watching the oil tapes 24/7, and I want to hear your take. If you want to keep your finger on the pulse of the global energy war, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. This is a game of billionaire poker, and the stakes just went through the roof. See you in the next one.